At the round table with Mamley, we're broadcasting on Facebook only this hour. But well, thanks, folks, for hanging in there with us. I want to thank our guest, Julia Mejia, candidate for at large for the city council here in the city of Boston. The election is going to take place on November 5th. That's next Tuesday, folks, November 5th at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the city of Boston. You know, make sure that you go out and vote. If you don't vote, you don't count. So I don't think I can say much more than that. We've been hammering it in over and over and over again. We keep talking about why we have the same problems, right? A big part of this is division amongst ourselves, right? Why? Because we don't support each other in the causes and election people that have our best interests at heart, right? And then we end up with what we have, and then we complain about that, but not enough to make sure that we make some changes. Like I said, the Halloween party at B3, as I endorse it, I support it, I volunteer. It is a fantastic time for families, but that is entertainment. We get excited about new sneakers, the newest iPhone. What we don't get excited about as much is voting, making sure that we vote in people who are going to represent us, right? Like Trump said, he wants to make America great again. And folks, I can honestly tell you, I don't think he's including our folks. But he's not calling for buses for certain people. He only wants buses and walls to keep certain folks out. So you're not paying attention, like you said. If you think it won't impact you, folks, they got a bus with your name on it. 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. Again, you're listening at the Roundtable with Mamleo. I'm your host, Larry Ellison, and here with Pastor Hobbs, holding it down for this last hour. So, again, we're going to kind of stay with the politics. We're going to cue up part of the interview from NPR that we played earlier as relates to the reverse freedom ride that took place back in the 60s. And folks, it's not much different from what's taking place today. And also there's a question in this week's edition of the Bay State Banner. Why do you think it's important to vote in the November 5th city council election? And then some very familiar faces this week. One being says Russell Holmes, state representative for Mattapan. He says, these are the elected officials who are closest to your issues and closest to solving them every day. They're the most impactful people in our lives. Nika Elgato, another state rep who's been on this show. We have such exciting candidates. It's so important for people to feel connected to government so they can hold their representatives accountable. I couldn't agree more. And Cindy Lou, an artist from Jamaica Plain, says, I'm not super happy with things in the city, including housing and climate readiness. I think Marty Walsh is pushing for luxury housing development. I'm excited to elect people who will push back. And here's definitely for me. A current city councilor, Kim Janey, said, it's a game changer. This year we have the opportunity to elect the most progressive, most diverse council in Boston's history. And Sydney Janey, I'm not sure if there's any relation, an educator and graphic artist from Roxbury, says, it's always important to vote your choice. If you don't vote, you don't count. And finally, Robert Torres, a community benefits in Jamaica Plain, states, we're dealing with so much politically at the national level. We need to have some local success we can point to. All great comments. And like I said, what are you going to do if you live in the city of Boston, or if there are elections in your town next week? What are you going to do? Are you going to vote? Are you going to hold people accountable? Are you going to hold yourself accountable first and foremost? Or are you going to sit home and continue to complain and wait for the next freebie to come around? And make sure we get the information out. Make sure we get everybody that does. We got to stop doing that, folks. It doesn't benefit us only for a couple of hours. And what are we teaching our kids? That you don't have to do anything to be civically engaged. Because, look, if they're not teaching it at your school, teach it at home. The schools don't teach your kids how to walk. You do. The schools don't potty train your children. You do. So step up and do for your children what others don't. Don't expect them to do it all for you. We don't expect it in our home, and we don't expect it from other folks. We know what our responsibilities as a parent, and I'm not trying to hit parent to you, but these are just basic things that folks need to start stepping up for themselves and stop independent. Even if you elect these folks, they're not going to solve all your problems. You've got to put some work in yourself. 617-282-0685 is a call-in number, 617-282-0685. And if Pastor Hobbs has that queued up, we're going to listen to, again, what we played in the 7 o'clock hour, the Reverse Freedom Ride. And I think why this ties into this upcoming election here.
This is WGBH's Morning Edition. The Freedom Rides in the early 1960s were a monumental event in the civil rights movement when black and white activists traveled through the South, their goal to integrate Greyhound buses. But what came the next summer has largely been forgotten when Southern segregationists retaliated with the Reverse Freedom Rides. They were even considered by some to be an urban legend. But WGBH News has spent several months digging through archives, finding reels of old TV footage and locating those in Massachusetts whose lives were defined by it. WGBH Radio's Gabriela Emanuel has the first of a two-part series on the Reverse Freedom Rides.
In 1962, late on a Wednesday afternoon, a Greyhound bus arrived in Hyannis, Massachusetts. The doors opened at the bus stop closest to the Kennedy compound. Lela Mae Williams and her 9 youngest children stepped onto the pavement. Silent TV footage captured the moment. In the recording, Lela Mae looks immaculate despite a 3-day journey from Arkansas. She's wearing a black shiny dress, a triple string of pearls, white high heels. She is dressed to meet the Kennedys.
She had been promised she was going to the Kennedys, where the Kennedys lived at. She was going to have a job and she was going to be able to support her family.
It was all a scam, all a hoax, and it was just embarrass the Kennedys, embarrass the president.
Mickey and Betty Williams are 2 of Lela Mae's children. Now in their 60s and 70s and living in the Boston area, they were 5 and 18 when the family became Reverse Freedom Riders. They were convinced or tricked by white segregationists into boarding a northbound bus.
When they put us on that bus and they brought us to the Kennedy compound, they was almost saying to the Kennedys, here you go, here's, calling them, others, here you go, here they are.
The Kennedys were not there to welcome the Williams family. There was no permanent housing as had been promised, no jobs. In 1962, Lela Mae Williams and about 200 other African Americans were simply dropped in northern cities. They were pawns in a segregationist game. It all started the year before, when segregationists like Ned Touchstone were incensed by the Freedom Rides.
Sending down busloads of people here with express purpose of violating our laws, fomenting confusion, trying to destroy 100 years of workable tradition and good relations between the races.
Touchstone joined George Singleman and others in answering the Freedom Rides with the Reverse Freedom Rides. They'd use the same weapon, the Greyhound bus, and send African Americans north. Then they'd see if the North liked it when blacks were in their backyard.
The ultimate accomplishment, of course, is to focus attention on the hypocrisy of the northern liberals.
The ploy to expose the North's racism grabbed headlines around the world, and Singleman was often on TV.
They have been crying the sing-song in behalf of the Negroes throughout the nation. And, of course, now when it comes time for them to put up or shut up, they have shut up.
Singleman orchestrated the Reverse Freedom Rides through local segregationist groups called citizens' councils. They were basically
the Ku Klux Klan without the hoods and the masks.
Clive Webb is at the University of Sussex in England. He says he's the type of historian who wants to wash his hands after he's been in the archives. He specializes in studying racists. He says the citizens' councils attempted to cloak segregation in respectability.
They could be members of the police force, they could be bankers, businessmen, and their like.
Local chapters bought bus tickets and fanned out across the South to enlist black riders.
They targeted people who were either welfare recipients or prison inmates, people who were placing a burden, as they saw it, on public resources.
The vision had been to send thousands north, but the reality was far smaller. Several hundred African Americans, mostly from Arkansas and Louisiana, accepted the northbound tickets. They went to New York, New Hampshire, Los Angeles, Idaho, the list goes on. The largest number, nearly 100, went to the Kennedys' summer White House in Hyannisport. That was far, far away from the Williams home in rural Arkansas. Betty and Mickey Williams remember growing up in Arkansas as both idyllic and tragic. There was the joy of fishing in the pond out back and the trauma of relatives dying without a doctor to visit.
I remember the flooding in the house, snakes underneath the beds. I mean, that's all. We were poor. We were really poor.
At the time, Arkansas was segregated, and the Williams family was confined to the black side of town. Betty says she didn't know anyone who was white.
Never thought about why we separated like this, why we can't go to school together, why we can't sit and eat together. I never even questioned that.
She didn't question it, but her mother was aware of the forces that swirled outside of their 3-room house.
My dad always had 3 pictures on a wall growing up in the South. John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy.
My mother was very much a Kennedy person, very much.
The Kennedys were seen as being sympathetic to African Americans, even though they were sometimes slow to move on issues of civil rights. While Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against the reverse freedom rides, the warning never made it to the Williams family.
My mom thought when she came to the North, she was going to have a better life for her children, better jobs, better housing, better everything for all of us.
Everything turned out to be nothing. One account from the time suggests it wasn't only empty promises. Some segregationists threatened to take families off the welfare rolls if they didn't board the buses. Betty and Mickey Williams only learned after their mother's death that their family's journey was part of a larger scheme. They don't know if she was coaxed or coerced, but they do know their mother was grasping for anything that might help her children.
Everything that a mom could do, everything within her power, everything within her reach, my mom did it.
According to a newspaper from the time, Lela Mae Williams told the segregationists that she couldn't take her children north until they finished the school year. Class let out on a Friday. On Sunday, segregationist Amos Guthridge sent a car to pick up Lela Mae and her 9 youngest kids, ages 2 to 14. Guthridge drove them from the family house 150 miles to Little Rock's bus terminal. On their way, they stopped and Guthridge treated the kids to ice cream and root beer.
They arrived in his station wagon. All of them kind of jammed into this station wagon.
Ernie Dumas was, at the time, a reporter for the Arkansas Gazette. Guthridge had told the local news outlets that he'd be having a press conference.
And so when he was there, he made a little grinning speech. Now these fine, fine people, this wonderful woman and her fine little children.
Guthridge paused, and Dumas says he thinks he saw Guthridge wink at his fellow segregationists.
We're going to send them up to Massachusetts, and the Kennedys and those fine people up there are going to take care of them and give them a better life.
In silent TV footage, Lela Mae is focused. The kids are giddy. One plays with a well-loved rabbit stuffed animal. The family has almost no luggage. Everything was going to be taken care of. Lela Mae Williams herds her children onto the bus, toward the back of the bus, and then onward toward a promise that was a lie. Gabriela Emanuel, WGBH, Boston's local and PR.
All right, so what you were listening to is NPR's Reverse Freedom Ride, and I said I was not aware of such a thing. I said history should not be a mystery, and those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it, and I think in some ways that's what's happening with today. We have had the pleasure of having our guest stop in, Pastor Dan Walker from Sound Travels here. Folks, you can hear it live here on Wednesdays at 8 to 9 a.m. I am a frequent caller-in. Love his show. Enjoy his show. Enjoy his mom segment there. Dan, welcome to the roundtable, sir.
Well, you know what they say. Speak of the pastor and he will appear.
There you go. Almost like, we set up the smoke there.
Yeah. But I guess we'll start off with the first stuff. For T. Michael to think that I needed to hear this type of stuff because I don't know the history of my people. Let's just say it's at best it's ill-conceived or ill-informed. At worst, it's condescending as heck. I didn't paint myself this color. I started off this way. My first earliest memories at 5 years old was being called the N-word by a Caucasian kid who was lying on me to get himself out of trouble in school. I have suffered the same amount of oppression as everybody who has this skin color. I've been stopped for DWB numerous times. I've had guns pointed on me because I was the wrong color at the right place by police officers. But I've also had the worst fight of my life against 6 people who happened to look exactly like me, who decided that they wanted my money because I was right across the street from what's called Mandela. Back in the day when it was elevated, there's some stores in there, and I went into that store after a long day of working and collecting monies and stuff, and they just decided that, well, here's a victim, and let's take his money. For the record, they didn't get a dime. They did tear the door off of my truck trying to get to me, and that didn't work out so well for anybody, but they didn't get a dime. I didn't lose my glasses. I didn't lose my life, and I fought off 6 young black Americans looking exactly like me that just decided that I was the victim. So for someone to say that I don't understand racial oppression because of my political views, it's a little insulting.
Well, let me ask you a question. Had you heard about, because I said, and I'm being honest, I had not heard about the Reverse Freedom Ride.
I have heard about it.
Until this document was produced.
I had heard about it. The problem is that once you start looking into all of our history, looking into the Kennedys, oh my goodness, they were talking a lot of stuff that they were not living. The Kennedy family itself was notorious. Its treatment of women was just abysmal. The treatment of their servants, the Kennedy compound. The darkest thing in that area was the road going to it. The Kennedys were not the great savior of the black American race.
One would say that Lyndon Johnson actually did more for civil rights than the Kennedys did.
He actually did. He actually did. And
if you understand history.
If you understand history, you understand that. And then you also understand that even he himself was a humongous racist. But he found himself in a situation where he either had to get in front of the train or get run over by it.
Right.
And I think that's and history will do that to people in positions of power. So if left alone, even when they describe Barack Obama, that doesn't get played much. But someone said he's a clean black, intelligent man.
That was Joe Biden.
Yeah. Joe Biden said that. Future.
Right. Paraphrase something that he was smart and intelligent.
He was smart, intelligent.
He was shocked by that.
Yeah. He was shocked by that. Future presidential candidate, Joe Biden. So I know. Sorry, I hate to bother. I hate to dispel people's myths with actual facts.
No, facts. we don't run from them. We don't dispute them. Yeah. Like I said, you and I have had those conversations. 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. You're listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Leo and Dan Walker here this morning, who hosts Sounds Travels here to be heard every Wednesday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. here on Boston Praise Radio and 102.9 FM. So Dan, we've had numerous conversations about the political climate in this country today, particularly coming out of Washington, D.C., and we differ quite a bit on how things are going, and we see things totally from different perspectives when it comes to that.
But we're also intelligent enough to recognize when we see things the same.
Absolutely. And I think that's you can't, as this is not a dig into the president, you can't put up walls, right? And when people start to tear them down, and that you see that they have a point, you have to be honest and open enough to say, right? And you have been, even contrary, like I said, I'm not here in defense of Dan Walker, but we've had conversations where we'd have the conversation. You say, hey, you know what? You open, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy exchange.
It has to be. And one of the things I'm very concerned about when I listen to all the candidates that are running for consular at large, I'm very concerned about the fact that they all seem to be of one political mindset. We don't have a Republican running. We don't have a person espousing quote unquote.
I don't know if she's officially, but she tells folks, Althea Garrison,
Mm-hmm.
that she is a Republican. That she's.
Well, have you heard her speak up?
I've heard her say that not in a large crowd, but
Okay.
I've heard her say that she's.
So it's so maybe she's flying under the radar because this is a Democratic town.
I think that's what happens. There's like
And-
she doesn't put it on her signs.
Right.
If you ask her, she doesn't offer it.
Right.
But if you ask her, she will definitely tell
And
you
see, to my mind, no.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Either you got both feet in,
or right.
So you can't get a baptism with one toe, right?
No, sir. No, not at all. Unless, of course, you're following the Roman Catholic faith, in which case they just sprinkle some water over you and call it George.
All right.
But
so Dan, let me take you, like I said, there's a lot of disjointment going on in Washington, D.C.
There is.
With this impeachment, right? And I know it's something you, like myself, have been following. Some folks say it's right down partisan lines, right? The vote they had to have an inquiry, a formal inquiry.
right. They voted to have a formal inquiry
Right.
after having closed door sessions.
Well, from what I've learned, that's not uncommon. That's
No,
happened in the past, so it's not.
It can, and the reality of it is that Nancy Pelosi herself was very quick to say out loud in public, "This is not an impeachment vote.
Right.
This is not. We're not voting to impeach the president." She wanted to be very clear that this is just a vote to establish the rules by which the committee would investigate the charges or come up with charges to impeach the president.
So,
could you put any more caveats on that, Nancy, or what?
The rules of engagement. So
Yeah.
let me get your perspective on what you've heard so far from the witnesses that have testified. And one would say, for the vast majority, maybe you might agree or not, that most of these folks who've testified don't have a dog in this hunt, meaning they are career public servants. Matter of fact, the gentleman Taylor, who is a retired military guy who was asked to come back by this administration. He was not a holdover from the Obama administration. And then the military gentleman, I believe, is Taylor. There's been so many. I apologize.
Right.
But the last two that testified, the military guy who the president attacked, just because he came in and told what his version of what it was, whether or not you believe what he's saying. But do you have any problem with anyone that doesn't agree? Because what he said was what the gentleman that testified last, I believe yesterday or the day before, that he somehow exonerated him from everything. And what he said was that he didn't see it as a crime, but he said that there was a cover-up in with the president. He was troubled by it, but it didn't rise to the level of a crime for him.
Well, okay, so the answer to the question is, was I okay with the fact that the drunk decided to only drive his old car instead of his new car? In other words, the whole process for me was tainted. You have instead of coming out and saying, we have a crime, the president has done this, and we are now going to investigate to make sure that what we see he has done. This investigation from the beginning has been an investigation in search of a crime. All of the impeachment actions that have happened in the past, all of them have all been done from day one in public. With Bill Clinton, it was clear he lied he lied in grand jury testimony. In Richard Nixon, it was clear he held back information concerning a break-in at the Watergate Hotel, and he lied to cover this up. So there has been clear crimes that have happened. 19 minutes after President John Trump was elected, 19 minutes, there was an article saying the impeachment of President Trump now begins.
But that was very similar to when President Obama, when Mitch McConnell said he'd be a one-term. So, I mean, he didn't say those exact words. I think that's just commonality. Those are, people say that.
I get that people just say stuff, right, except that in Obama's case, there was never any overt action that I can remember.
Well,
but
I think also he didn't give them cause that,
Well, whether he
that
gave them-
rose to impeachment.
Whether
or not.
he gave them cause or not, there was never any overt action.
Right.
And Donald Trump gave those committees cause because he beat the one. I think once he took out or beat legitimately within the rules given by this country, Hillary Clinton, from that point on, it was on. She was the anointed. She was the appointed. She was going to continue Obama's legacy.
Right.
And I think if she had been elected, we would not have known any of the stuff that we now know concerning the two lovers, the illicit lovers who said, "Don't worry, we have a plan B."
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have known any of that stuff. We wouldn't have known about the Russian, the Russian and the Ukrainian
Right. Right.
connections. We wouldn't have known none of that.
But one would say two wrongs don't make a right, and I
Well-
don't excuse her behavior. And like I said, I'm not excusing that she should not have been held accountable. I think that they got that wrong. I
Well,
definitely do.
Clearly,
But
and it's not done yet, by the
right,
way.
and that's fine. And whatever comes out of that should come out of that.
I agree.
But here with the current occupant of the White House, Donald Trump, right? You know, just from the beginning, that clearly, you know, there's a consciousness of guilt, right?
Well, he came out swinging.
No, well, he didn't come out swinging because what they did from the beginning with that transcript, which he said was an exact transcript, which it is not, right? It is those dots are missing. That's almost like the water.
Right, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
Exactly, but the way it was handled immediately after, it was put into a server that is not normal for just calls of that nature.
It was put into a secure server.
A secure server,
Yes.
and it had no business and no reason to be there other than you didn't want somebody to see it because it had the impact that it's having now, that it was inappropriate behavior. And the founders of this country, it didn't say high crimes and misdemeanors, and it's a broad interpretation of what that means, right? It doesn't mean that you have to commit a crime, but what they desperately did not want, from my understanding, is they didn't want foreign governments interfering with our elections.
And you're absolutely right.
I'm going to ask you the same
Yeah.
questions I've been asked of a lot of folks who. Do you have any problem with the President of the United States asking foreign countries to investigate citizens of the United States for his own political gains? Because that's really what this comes down to.
So the answer to your question, the way you asked the question presupposes a whole series of things.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to your question is why, yes, Mr. Larry, I do have a problem with the president. I have to because everything. I'm just saying the way you asked the question presupposes the answer has to be yes, but it assumes facts, not an evidence, and also there's a difference of opinion of how this is all going down.
But what is in dispute? What came out of the president's mouth he did these things?
Okay,
his chief of staff that he said.
I'm going to Well, first of all, let's deal with a couple of things.
Sure.
How the transcript gets written, and I don't think either one of us, to our discredit, has ever described how the transcript gets written in the first place. So what happens?
But let me just step you there for a second, because the president said it when it was an exact transcript,
Okay.
word for word.
I understand that aspect of it.
But that's not true.
But that's not true. That's not exactly what happened. However,
so that means that things are missing.
However, okay, what it means is what it means. The problem with this president is you can't defend him on exactly what he says, because this guy says exactly what he says, and he's so wrong when it comes to exactly what he says. But hang on now. The whole point of the transcript was first of all, they never thought he'd release it. That's the first problem. But that's an argument for another time. How the transcript gets written is that there are people who are on the phone listening. There's a committee of people, both partisan and nonpartisan, listening to this phone call, and they are because you're not allowed to record anything that's being said. I don't know if that's a law. I don't know if it's in the Constitution, but the actual phone call itself is not allowed to be recorded. But there's a committee of people who are listening to the phone call, and they're writing down. I don't know if anybody has ever been through a child investigation where DSS comes into your home. They can't record anything in your home, but they are trained as observers to write everything they see.
Very meticulous notes.
Very meticulous notes. When they come into your house, they'll notice that the roach went across the floor. They'll say in your writing, because you are allowed to see that writing, there was a roach that went across the floor. Mm-hmm. So these are people who are trained to listen to everything that's being said and to write down what they hear. And then at the end of the conversation, the committee listens and everybody checks their notes, and then they release what they come up with is what happened. And after saying that, what actually several of the people who have listened to the transcript, who have read the transcript, says this is an exact representation, not word for word, except for some of the calls.
Right, but but the president is representing it as such. He's saying he's the one who is saying that
he said it's a perfect call.
It's an exact.
And here's
word for word is his comment.
Well,
he's quoted. Word for word means just that.
Okay, and here's my issue, even if it's exactly word for word, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the president asking somebody to look into corruption in his country that may involve our people. If see, here's the thing. If President Trump had said to the Ukraine president, the new Ukraine president, listen, we got this guy Joe Biden over here. He's running for office. We know his son was Can you check that out to see if there's anything going on there?
And that had already been looked into.
But that's not what he said. He said, I understand. And again, I should have brought the transcript in. It's been here all this time, and now it's in the back of my car, which is useless. I did notice your truck sitting across the street, by the way. I saw that.
The 2 flat tires now?
No, not 2. No, actually, I don't flatten tires anymore. I just take the valve stems out.
Okay. 617-282-0685.
It's way more frustrating.
617-282-0685. You're listening at the Round Table with Mamleo. I'm your host, Larry Elson. Our guest, Dan Walker from Sound Travels here, heard every Wednesday from 8 to 9 a.m. But Dan, I think, I hear what you're saying.
Which is?
That what you say, that there's nothing improper.
Correct.
And with the president and with the way he dealt with that.
Right.
But I also, you're a reasonably intelligent man.
Thank you.
That he didn't say look into anybody, or he didn't say look into corruption in totality. When you single out an individual who happens to be the one you feel is the most competitive with you in this race.
But he didn't do that.
He said
and see, here's the problem. When he says look into corruption, I find it curious that everybody is immediately assuming he's talking about Joe Biden. You see, this is a problem. If he had said check out the Biden connection, if he had used Joe's or his son's name, he said investigate corruption, and everybody immediately assumes that he's talking about Joe Biden.
Well,
why?
I got to jump in here because, when you send your personal attorney over there, right?
Yes.
With no authority to represent this country, he's over there doing your bidding, right?
Okay. And the president is allowed to do that.
No, but he has to do it officially, right? He has to make him an envoy. He can't just send people over. He has no authority to speak on behalf. Like I said, the president can do that.
Thank you.
But he can't do it in secret. Okay,
well,
there's a procedure.
If it were secret, how come we know about it?
Because it was found out. That's how. Because 2 of his cronies that were working with them are in jail. Were arrested.
Again, we're not going to go. We had this discussion about guilty by association.
Well,
and we both agreed.
I think there's a history here, right?
Well, again, it takes us down a rabbit hole because remember, you deal with criminals all day long.
Absolutely.
And you're not guilty by association.
That's true, but I'm not dealing with them in the way that this is taking place. And here's the thing: is that these 2 gentlemen have said through their attorney that they have the right to executive privilege because somehow they work for the president. These are
well, they can claim anything they want, and the fact that they're in jail not for anything related, by the way, to President Donald J. Trump, but they're in jail for how they lived their lives in the past.
I think at some point, right, you have to deal with the reality of it, right? Because where is the president's former attorney that was representing him?
Where's
Cohen?
Again,
where is Cohen?
Cohen
is in jail.
Cohen's in jail.
And why is he in jail?
Because he
lied about
what he did.
For the president.
Excuse me. What he lied about is not having to. And again, people forget this.
But
Let me
to
finish
whose
now.
benefit?
The president is free to enter into any type of financial agreement with anybody. He is free to authorize payments for hush or whatever.
No, it's a violation, campaign violation.
Excuse me. He's free to use his own money to do what he wants with it. And if it was a clear-cut campaign violation, they'd have walked him out there in handcuffs because they've been looking for some reason.
Because
yes, it is
while
true.
he's in office, he has said, "I can go down to Fifth Avenue
But
and shoot
the
someone."
Supreme Court has not upheld that. That's one more Donald Trump hyperbole that causes people to lose their
Attorney
minds.
General Barr is going to go after the president?
Well,
for
why
any
wouldn't
wrongdoing?
he?
Why didn't he look into this matter?
Why hasn't he looked into Hillary Clinton, which he's actually beginning to do now?
Right,
Finally,
right. He's looking into the Mueller probe. Why?
And finally, and all of these things.
So something as important as this, the Department of Justice. Matter of fact, he's flying around on the behalf, acting as if he is the president's personal attorney.
He may
as well.
Excuse me.
That's not his job. He works for the taxpayer.
He works for the taxpayer, and now he is beginning to. And I think this is something that is long overdue. He's now beginning to investigate everything. Because see, here's the problem I have with the Mueller report. I actually have many problems, starting with the fact that it's clear that Mueller himself didn't write it. And we know this because I watched when he didn't know what was in his own report. And even after even after it was read to him, he says, "I'm not going to comment on anything that's not in the report." And the reality of it is, he didn't know what was in his own report. So I'm convinced he didn't write it.
Right.
But that's beside the point.
But is there anything in this that troubles you? Because even
I think there are many things in it to trouble me.
These are what concerns me. Is this is the president of the United States who, if you take this off the table, right? What he said when our national security folks give him information, they said these are not people who have anything to gain. That says that Russia interfered with our elections. Right?
I've got news for you.
It's been confirmed.
This may be a big shock to you, and it really shouldn't be, because just as you've complimented my intelligence, let me compliment yours, and within the same respect. This should not be a big shock to you. Russia does not want America to succeed. Russia and Ukraine and all of our enemies. You have to understand something, and this is what I keep trying to explain to people about the bigger picture. When I was talking with about the progressivism of her life, and I think it's a great thing. But I'm very happy that she said whatever political mindset works, that's what she wants to be, because she wants to be the best for the people. And I agree with her. If you lock yourself into a thought process, then you can't think beyond that. And I think that's where the problem is. That's one of the reasons why I'm supporting her, but I can't.
Right.
So that's why. But when it comes to getting back to what you're saying.
But no, let me just explain, and I'll let you finish. Because here's my question. Before this came up, when all the intelligence came out from the folks who we entrust to make us secure, said that Russia was involved in this, and they continue to be involved in this, and they gave this information to the president. Everyone knew this to be true. And the president stood there at one of these summits, and he said he had just spoken to Vladimir Putin, and that he said that he didn't do it, he didn't interfere, that Russia did not interfere, and he has no reason to disbelieve him. You don't find that trouble that the president would take it over the one who you said.
Yeah. You've asked me this question before, and the answer isn't going to change. I believe that President Donald Trump is not a dummy. And sometimes the best way to discover what your enemy is truly doing is to get him to believe you're his friend.
How's that working out in North Korea?
Well, again,
but the
answer to the question is North Korea is not sending bombs over to us.
They're on their way. They just tested another one.
They're testing long range. I know what they're doing. I understand that. But see, here's the problem.
But what happened to all this diplomacy kissing up the dictators? It's not working.
It's not kissing up the dictators when you bring them in. Oh my God, you never saw The Godfather.
No.
No. You have to keep your enemies. You have to keep your enemies very close.
That's
and
true.
The best way to keep them close is to talk to them and get them to either think or believe.
But to disregard your own intelligence over your dictators, your enemies?
And you are making an assumption that he's disregarding his
He
intelligence.
said he doesn't believe it.
Well, again,
What is that?
Again,
So
why
am
do
I
you
not to
believe?
believe what comes out of his mouth?
Why
even
do
though
you?
most of it's a lie.
Why do you believe him then when you don't believe him other times?
Listen,
what I'm trying to say
I know
to
a
you,
lie when I hear it,
Well,
but it's
what-
coming out of his mouth. Dan.
I
That's what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying, but again,
but I don't understand what you're saying.
what I'm trying to
because
say is
you're
I
trying to
don't.
have it both ways.
What
It's
I'm trying to
believe
do.
him when he's lying, but it's not. It's just Donald
Well,
Trump
I
lying,
believe him
so
when
it
he.
doesn't
Well,
believe.
no, what I'm trying to say to you is, you would like to focus on when you think he's lying, and what I'm trying to point out to you is that this man, so far, has been ahead of everybody who's been trying to pinpoint him, and who's been trying to pigeonhole him, who's been trying to get him.
No, he's used a bully tactic to keep.
He has outsmarted. He has out
I wouldn't
campaigned.
use smart and Donald Trump.
I'm
in the
sure
same
you wouldn't, but
sentence.
guess I do. He has outsmarted. He has out-campaigned. He has managed to win every time somebody has come after him. This is not somebody who you should take lightly. So when he says, I don't believe so-and-so is doing such and such, you take it at face value, fine, and you run with it. But that's not the answer. The answer is to wait and see exactly what falls out. Remember, this is a person whose whole campaign, whose whole presidency should never have been.
I agree, and
Do you
he
kn-
wasn't prepared for
Do
it.
you know how many polls had him as winning?
Look, and
And the answer to that question, by the way, is 2.
I have said to
But
you,
none of
and
them-
I have said to others, that Donald Trump won this election fair and square. That's not in dispute.
Well,
He
what
won.
I'm
It's
trying to
how
tell you
he's
is
running this.
What I'm
country.
trying to tell you is that he is not running this country any different than he ran his campaign. He is doing what he
But
does,
it's not
which
a
is
private business. He's not a
well,
private citizen any longer.
he's
Dan.
a public citizen, and okay, let's talk about his public his the lowest unemployment rate for black people in
What
the
was
history.
right, you keep trying to give him credit for that. What was
Well,
it when he took over?
What is it now?
It said 3.7, 3.8.
When
it
President
was at 4.2
when President Obama, the lowest rate President
What was
Obama
it-
ever achieved was 4 point something.
What was it when he got it? Do you remember?
I don't.
It was over 10%.
Okay,
Right,
he brought
so
it down.
he
But what I'm
brought it
trying
down.
to
But
tell
you don't want to give credit for that.
I give Barack
No.
Obama credit for when he was in office.
But here's the thing:
He's
you're
out
sitting
of
here
office.
saying that this president has done so great things, right?
Yes.
He was riding on the wave of the success from the Obama
However,
administration.
and we had this discussion. He could have just as easily parked that car and done his own thing. The fact that he was smart
no,
enough,
in spite of
the
him,
fact
things
that-
have continued
the
to grow.
fact that he was smart enough to continue some of the ideas and some of the policies to bring the numbers
Well,
down
okay,
is
then
only
why
an
won't you-
example of how he knows how to make
But Dan,
things
you're-
work.
I think you're a very reasonable man, right?
Well-
if I did something and I did it, and I think you would give me credit where credit is due, right?
I try to.
You would, right?
Which-
I think you
yeah.
would. I don't dispute that. I believe that about you.
Well,
So, but
thank
he
you.
is always disparaging. So why doesn't he give credit for the success of his predecessor, like
Well,
you would?
Because in his world, and see again.
But everybody can't live in that
But
little
no,
narrow world.
no. Every president has always lived in his own little narrow world. We're not going to go back
Nothing
through that.
like this.
Because this is not a person who fits any mold. So you're absolutely right. Nothing like this. Every other president has had a preconceived notion, has been groomed, has come through the system in some way, shape, or form. Nobody has ever, not even Abraham Lincoln, nobody has ever come out of complete obscurity into the White House. That's never happened before.
Right.
And since that's never happened before, it's difficult to hold his presidency to models that don't exist, because by the models that existed, he shouldn't be president.
I
Well,
agree.
Okay, but I started to say something and you got me off of it. Let me get back onto this on this Russia thing. When it comes to our enemies, and understand something, America, and this is one of the issues that I don't think I hear politicians saying enough. This America First campaign, which scares people, doesn't scare me. Because I think somebody should be advocating for me as an American. Now, if you wish to call yourself whatever other, I define myself as Scott-Irish Afro-American. My two surnames, one is Scottish, one is Irish. The fact that I am black in this country means I'm Afro, and the fact that I am, in fact, American means me an American. So I define myself as Scott-Irish Afro-American. You don't have to. You can define yourself as whatever you want to call yourself. Fine. This is America. You got free will. But What I'm trying to say is that in order for America to succeed, everybody else has to be wrong. Because America as a country was founded on, we hold these principles to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator. Okay? And when you have a country set up on that line by itself, whether we can live up to it and have lived up to it, which we all know, especially as all men sitting of color here, every one of us knows that we have fallen short.
Right.
But when you have that set up as a country, that means countries that have that means countries that are established with dictators, with political, with dictators, with with religious, or with totalitarian governments. All of those countries that have set up, which is all of them except for America, if we are right, they are all wrong.
Pastor Hobbs, you have some comments in the chat room?
Certainly. Terrence E. from Grace Senior from B. Moore is saying, how does anyone justify corruption? So much corruption.
From someone who said he was going to drain the swamp, he brought the swamp and put them.
Well, I
around
think
the White House, right?
what he has done is he has exposed so much of this, and again, these leading questions. How do I justify corruption? That presupposes, I think, that what your premise is correct, and I don't. Well, if you want to ask me about a particular thing, whether I'm justifying or not,
then let me ask you this, right? Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. That he was going to, he was smart. He only put smart people, intelligent people around him, and he alone could fix it. We've had we're on our number fourth chief of staff in the first administration. We've gone through, I don't know how many secretaries of defense, how many national security advisors, right?
What's your point?
My point is, if you're a manager of a company, and I hired you to manage it, and you said that you had this expertise in bringing in all of these intelligent people, and none of them last, that's the reflection on. You don't think that's any reflection on the management of the person? I think you got to be honest with.
I'm going to be honest with you. You're not going to like my answer because I think you have to get to the people that work, and all the people that he had brought in, when they don't work, he gets rid of them, or when they show themselves to be who they are. But one of the things Donald Trump does is he allows people to be who they are.
No, you're telling me that's why you say you're a businessman. You're an expert on identifying the right people.
Right.
And so how do you keep getting it wrong?
Well, guess what? He doesn't.
No,
I don't
explain
think
that.
It's easy. I don't think he's getting it wrong. I think he's doing
Why aren't they still there?
Because they were the wrong person. And I think you have to let people be who they are. I can tell you that I can paint the Sistine Chapel. You say, fine. You bring me in. You hand me a brush. When you come back, you see a sunshine.
But Dan,
it's not, in other words.
With your background, he's saying that he.
And then the other part of this you keep forgetting is that there are a lot of people out there that he has to fail. Donald Trump has to be
So you think all these people he handpicked that and what's the name? They said he's just the biggest hawk there, the last national security guy, right? Who said
he said that he disagreed with him on how they were going to handle certain things.
And he said
when you disagree with Donald Trump, he didn't tell him to quit, by the way.
John Bolton?
Yeah.
What do you think about the president's last chief of staff, right?
I think that Donald Trump goes through people.
That Kelly, he said to him on his way out the door.
Yeah.
Let me finish. He said on his way out the door, if you hire a yes man to replace me, you're going to be impeached. He knew what was coming. He forecasted what was going to happen by him.
This was not Mesmo the magician here. Donald Trump knew from day one when the newspaper article says 19 minutes after you're elected, the impeachment of you begins. You don't need to see handwriting. You do not need to see.
These are his people. He picked John Kelly. John Kelly was not a holdout.
But you have to understand something. Just like all of us, we can say that we know what we're doing when we pick somebody because we're going on what they say.
But he said he was a master of this.
Okay,
man.
listen.
So that says something to his competency, right?
Except that so far he's done good.
Where? We have more acting people than we have in this. I've never seen it, and you have to be honest with that, Dan.
I
There's
am
never
honest
been
with
an
it.
administration that has so many acting people in very serious positions that there should be some.
I think he has done well, okay. Well, first of all, one of the things
And why
he has.
do you attack them after you put them if they don't agree with you? Right? That's
Donald,
childish. Isn't it?
let me say this again. Donald Trump never starts any fights. He never ever goes after anybody personally until they come after him first. And this has been the history, even back during his campaign.
So
when the
this
big,
guy Taylor, how did he come after him? He told the truth. How was that coming after him?
Again,
he told what was in there. How was that? How did he start that fight?
Okay, again, I have to. If you investigate seriously, all the people that come after him, he doesn't start fights.
When is the
he
last
just
time
doesn't.
When is the last time you've heard President Obama say anything publicly about Donald Trump?
Well,
the last time?
The last thing I heard, remember President Obama
prior
saying
to the election, right? It was during the campaign.
No, I remember when he said, "Well, if President Trump wants to thank somebody for this current economy, you ought to thank me." That's what he said.
So would you say he deserves some credit? Would you agree with that? He brought it from 10 down to 4. You don't think he deserves any credit? You're giving Donald credit for the economy?
Okay, can I answer the question?
Yeah, because
I think that he does deserve credit for bringing the unemployment down from 10 to 4. However,
I knew that was coming.
However, it's 4 is not 3. So he got it down to where he was going.
So
but
let's get this straight. I'm not a math genius.
Well,
or
I'm not a
like
math.
that,
Neither one of us is.
Let's stop here. Let's stop here, right? I go from 10 to 4. That's
right.
6. I bring it down 6 points.
Right.
The next guy comes and brings it down less than 1 point. And you think that's a greater accomplishment?
Well, I think in this situation, yes, because
in this situation,
I think in this
you can always try to fit it in where you want, but
because we're dealing with what we're dealing with.
We're dealing with reality, which
and the reality
would
of
come
it,
over too.
And no. Well, where are we at here? Okay. Frankly, our moderator's about to explode sitting over there. Go ahead.
No, our time is gone.
Time is gone.
All right.
Okay.
All right. You've been listening to At the Round Table. Dan, you've got to come back. We've got to finish this. Part 2, part 10 probably of
the latest go-around here.
All right. We'll see you next week.